Hello, bonjour. I mean, thank you all for joining us here today. There we go. There we go. Now I can see you. Thank you. It's so essentially we're super excited to be here today, and we want to start off by thanking Festival Events Ontario for having us here today, and thank you to all attending and spending some of your highly valued time with us today. I'd like you to join me in acknowledging the significant contributions of Indigenous communities to tourism wherever you are. If I had the pleasure of connecting with you all today in person, I would start with a land acknowledgement, recognizing all that I am on traditional and all of the traditional territories in Canada, home to many First Nation, Métis, and Inuit people who have called these territories home since time immemorial. Please take a moment with me to reflect on the traditional lands that you reside on and acknowledge the extraordinary value of Indigenous peoples across Canada, all First Nation, Métis, and Inuit people, bringing and all they bring to the tourism industry. Thank you for your contributions. So, my name is Billy Alexander. I'm the Director of Programs for the Culinary Tourism Alliance. But it was my almost 25 years as a tourism hospitality. It was almost my 25 years of tourism and hospitality experience as one of Canada's top Indigenous chefs that led me to this position. When it comes to the Feast On program and the work that we do at the Culinary Tourism Alliance, I have decades of firsthand on-the-ground experience as an operator, consultant, tourism leader provincially, nationally, and internationally. I've personally experienced many, if not all, of the hospitality and tourism industry struggles, and I'm always working to develop plans and strategies that will allow us to move past our struggles and build back better. The Feast On program and the Culinary Tourism Alliance is here to help the entire industry move forward in recovery through a localized culinary tourism lens.
And hi, everyone. I'm Zoe Galanis. I'm the events coordinator at the Culinary Tourism Alliance, and I've worked at the Culinary Tourism Alliance on programs for about a year and a half. My background is in hospitality and more specifically events, and have worked in a few different markets, the Bahamas, the US, a short time in Europe, and of course here in Canada. So in working with the Feast On program and Culinary Tourism Alliance, I've had the honor of getting to better understand the sentiments of stakeholders all across culinary tourism, and I look forward to speaking with you today. We will be sharing a little bit about our organization, what we do, tell you about some of the practices that we've applied to our event programming, and that has resulted in great success, which we have measured through increased event participation. So to give you a little bit of a rundown on the agenda, we'll look again about our organization, speak about culinary tourism, share the profile of what a culinary tourist is, and then move on to speaking about some of our programming, Feast On, the Feast On program, and end with some best practices that we've applied to our culinary tourism events, and then a Q&A. The culinary tourism, which in this presentation we'll refer to a lot as the CTA, works to bridge the gap between food and drink and travel industries with the vision of having food tourism as a recognized and meaningful and sustainable contributor to local food economies and destinations all across the world. We were founded in 2006 to implement the 2005 to 2015 Ontario Culinary Tourism Strategy and Action Plan on behalf of the Ontario Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Sport. And we operate as a not-for-profit organization. Our mission is to bridge the gap between the food and drink and tourism industries. So the work of the CTA, for a little bit of background, spans across the disciplines of programs, services, and events. Our services include destination development, monitoring and evaluations, and marketing and strategy. Throughout the life of the organization, we've held and continue to hold a series of culinary tourism events. And last but not least, we create programs that center around culinary tourism. So these include membership programs, the Ontario Tourism Resiliency Awards, and Feast On. We're devoted to supporting the growth and development of food tourism, and in speaking about what we do, it's very important to quickly address what we define food tourism as. So I will pass it over to Billy to speak about this.
Perfect. Thanks, Zoe. Yeah, when we look at defining culinary tourism, we define it as any tourism experience where a person interacts with food and drink that reflects the history, heritage, and culture of a place. Culinary tourism, food tourism, gastronomy tourism, they all mean the same thing and sometimes are interchangeably used. The most important thing to remember is that culinary tourism is focused on the meaningful connection between food and place. Culinary tourism reflects the place, enriches experiences, and when done right, it can be a valuable tool to boost economic, social, and community development as an overall whole. Culinary tourism uncovers the intangible value for the visitor to connect with the place through food. When we look at the culinary tourism value chain, we find so often that business or operators do not consider themselves to be stakeholders in culinary tourism. But this actually couldn't be further from the truth, because food tourism is about both learning and consumption. There are so many levels to what we call food tourism value chain, which encompasses all people involved in culinary tourism. The food tourism value chain presented here demonstrates how the whole food system is connected. As you can see, it is made up of many different types of stakeholders, including restaurants, wineries, breweries, farms, and farmers markets, but also anywhere that a visitor could get a taste of place. At an event, accommodation, at a gift shop or retailer, at an attraction such as a museum, an agricultural exhibit, a harvest festival, festivals, and cooking schools, to name a few more. But because many food and beverage businesses don't think of themselves as tourism businesses, these businesses often do not harness the value that local food and drink can bring to their products and service offerings. And this is how we get events and attractions such as museums, offerings, food that have nothing to do with the place, nothing to do with the place in which they can operate. In short, this model illustrates the interconnectedness of businesses that operate in the space and show us how you all in some way are a part of this food tourism value chain. When we look at characteristics of food tourists, it's in the best interest of every stakeholder of the food tourism value chain to know the profile of the culinary tourist, as well as what food tourists are looking for as they experience varying elements of culinary tourism. These characteristics are important to keep in mind as you plan your event, coordinate what food experiences will be there and what they will look like. Some common characteristics of food tourists, according to the UNWTO Global Report on Food Tourism, are they are concerned about about origin of products. They have a higher than average expenditure. The percentage of value goes beyond price. A food tourist wants to know where it is from, why, is it sustainable, is it local, what is the others in influence behind it? Does it have a hands-on component or is it interactive? Food with meaning is taking preference over price, status, and materialism. There are adventurous, highly loyal, and masters of social media. They want the VIP treatment. They also are looking for tailored, exclusive experiences that may make them feel like they are getting a behind-the-scenes or VIP experience. They look for authentic narratives, so telling a story is very, very important. When we look at what food tourists are continually looking for, local food, they're looking for local food and beverages, unique, distinctive experiences celebrating the region, custom, high-quality experiences, easy booking, attractive, informative, rich web experiences, web presence, so they can be excited about it ahead of time. Partnerships are key in showcasing how your experience is made. Active on social media, strong customer service, and accessibility and efficient wayfinding is key in the tourism destination. What tourists are looking for, again, just to recap, accessibility, ease of convenience are key factors to attracting all guests. Focusing on your unique products, those items and experiences that offer tastes of place is an important factor for attracting tourists. This is about what makes your business's city or region unique. Highlighting these assets will make you stand out. Tailored experiences that make guests feel special are popular with culinary event attendees. Festivals and events are major economic drivers for communities. They incorporate tastes of local products, heighten guest experience, but also supports the community and makes an event stand out on its own. When coordinating events, you should try to keep all of these things in mind.
So it may be some time before we see the pre-pandemic scenes of people casually attending mass gatherings or mingling in the same way that they did in 2019. But what we do know is that before the pandemic, experiential travel was on the rise. And this is likely to continue once more people feel safe. So are some of the things that we do know. People are seeking human connection, which is very promising for events. Events have the ability to offer hands-on multisensory experiences that guests are looking for. We know that we are rethinking our food systems. Guests increasingly want to know where their food comes from. They want, and culinary tourism can help visitors to connect people with place in a more meaningful way. There will continue to be a rise in experiential tourism, and we know that because culinary tourists are especially eager for hands-on experiences, getting to know a place better and incorporating culinary related programming into your event is a very good idea. We know that we will need to continually communicate with visitors about how we're keeping them safe and apply event design that prioritizes safety. We've learned that rural and remote destinations are seen as safer by guests. So outdoor activities and events with fewer crowds will likely be favored. This presents an opportunity to target event guests that who may typically look to travel elsewhere to events into events that take place locally and closer to home. So all of these considerations and many more will be important to keep in mind when looking ahead at post-pandemic tourism and event development. And we've considered these factors as well as the profile of culinary tourists, which Billy just spoke about when designing and planning our own events. So we are now going to move on into a discussion about some of the broad practices that we've applied to our culinary tourism event coordination. These practices have proven to cultivate event success, and they've been developed based on our knowledge of the profiles of culinary tourists, what culinary tourists are looking for, and what we think the future of culinary tourism will look like, and so have therefore applied these best practices. We will use our signature event, Feast on the Farm, as a case study to illustrate how leveraging these practices has played an important role in enhancing our event, and share about lessons learned in our endeavor to apply each of these practices to planning. For background, Feast on the Farm is the CTA's flagship 2-day zero waste event. It takes place multiple times per year in different regions all across the province. So the event series is produced in partnership with destination marketing organizations and or regional tourism operators. And these events take place right now 4 to 5 times a year. Each event consists of one consumer day followed by an industry day. And they showcase the best of Ontario destinations, local food and beverages, and top restaurant talent. These events emphasize programming centered around themes related to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And they are an extension of the Feast On program that bring together operators, purveyors, and partners to celebrate and share our network and destination partnerships. If you're unfamiliar with what Feast On is, it is the CTA's flagship program, so not an event, but rather a program that certifies Ontario food and beverage operators and producers who prove committed to sourcing and producing local food that's local to Ontario. So we essentially audit businesses, procurement, and we certify them feast on if their local food and beverage procurement is 25% or higher. And we have a network of over 150 restaurants and 40 producers that are feast on certified. Moving back to Feast on the Farm, the event series was piloted last year. And so while we walked away with great lessons, we also experienced great success, which is why we've grown our event from 2 to 5 this year. In partnership with Tourism Simcoe County and Explore Waterloo at the New Farm and Langdon Hall Country House, respectively, last year, we brought together 215 attendees, 7 locally minded chefs, each representing Feast on certified restaurants, 8 Ontario-based VQA and craft beverage producers, including Bear Cider, VQA wine producers, and local sparkling water producer. We brought together 8 industry-led panels, and they all presented on the UN Sustainable Development Goals, Goal 1, 12, 14, and 15. And we had thousands of digital impressions and a wait list of over 200 people for the event. So here are the practices that resulted in our experienced success. First of all, partnership participation. The first best practice that we've applied to our events in the past and all events going forward is partnership participation. Utilizing partnership participation is an extremely beneficial tactic to culinary event programming in particular. Our success has been connecting with partners early on in the planning process so that coordination is collaborative, and adopting different kinds of partnership models all within one event to make the event experience as dynamic as possible. So we've opted for long-lasting partnerships with people and organizations with whom we share common goals. We've looked to engage with organizations and individuals that we have already forged relationships with pre-event, and partners that we could work with in capacities beyond a single event. So our advice here is diversifying partnership models. So not everyone has to be a sponsor. Bringing stakeholders together in varying capacities prove really beneficial, and making sure that there's clarity on how partnership is benefiting all parties has been really important in our event planning. Using partnership to build community has also been very important, and tapping into our partners' networks to share stories that about our collaboration efforts has also proven very beneficial to us. Some of the ways that we've implemented partnership participation are as follows. So each Feast on the Farm is hosted in partnership with, as I mentioned earlier, a DMO or an RTO. And last year we had 2 destinations on board. This year we had 5. We have 5. And we share a common goal of using this particular culinary tourism event to celebrate and elevate the region's taste of place and celebrating local food businesses. Our destination partnerships also extend outside of Feast on the Farm, as the CTA is also engaged with destinations through a destination membership program. So we create long-lasting partnerships by creating opportunities for engagement with our destinations partners before, during, and after each event in varying capacities. In terms of aligned sponsorships, we at Feast on the Farm have sponsorship partners who are able to contribute programming aligned with the event, and who have committed to facilitating the progress of the Feast on program as a whole. So selecting sponsors that will contribute to organizational success overall has been key in selecting who we collaborate with. In terms of industry partnerships, we collaborate with different industry stakeholders that and pool our talents and resources to produce this event. So industry partners are involved at varying degrees, and we also pay our chefs and our producers for their participation, and that's very important to us. And finally, venue selection. When we select a venue, we don't just approach a venue to book a space, but part of our venue selection includes or involves rather determining how the venue's team can be involved in event programming. So we look to host events at venues that have some element of agritourism, for example. This is a way of this goes away from like instead of simply booking a space, we get a venue to become involved in programming, which extends partnership creation through participation in Feast On. And finally, actually, this is finally remembering that culinary tourists are looking for authentic narratives or experiences that involve multiple partners is important. So sharing the stories of all of your partnership efforts proves to be quite beneficial. These are some of the benefits of creating partnerships. So it increases awareness by teaming up. Partners can double down on marketing campaigns, increasing event awareness. This partnership obviously like leverages expertise and adds credibility. So partnering up with established organizations brings credibility not only to both parties, but to the event, especially if it's a new event. Filling in the gaps. Partnership helps to fill in the gaps in lacking areas, may it be funding, communications, or otherwise, and it helps to pool resources, avoid overlap, so that you're not duplicating efforts, and it increases efficiency, which we all appreciate in event production. And promotes innovation. So collaborating thoughts always produces new and innovative ideas. It shares responsibility. So which really helps in all stages of event planning, from planning to production. And it expands audiences, which we found to be so true. So in working with various members from across the food tourism value chain and in other industries, we've been able to delve into different sectors of attendees and really expand who we have at our events. So creating partnerships encourages the shift to collaboration over competition, which is also very important to us. And they're important components, as I know you all know, of events, because they allow for more local business and organization involvement. And we're all really just trying to build capacity. So I'll turn it over to Billy to continue on with our best practices.
Yeah, thanks, Zoe. So another best practice that we've applied to our event planning is the importance and the connection of connecting guests to tastes of place. When connecting any guests to tastes of place, it's all about culinary tourism, but you can use this to actually differentiate your event. Doing this will help to reach culinary tourists who are interested in the origin of products and or looking for local food and beverage. The future of culinary tourism involves us all rethinking our food systems. Connecting visitors to place has an outdoor agritourism experience as being in demand. Connecting guests to tastes of place naturally incorporates all of these elements in one way or another. One thing you'll hear me emphasizing on is tastes of place. It is possible for any region, community event to have multiple tastes of place, and isn't confined to a box of putting any one culture, history, or heritage as being a singular representation. So it's a great way to increase diversity as well through a culinary lens. One of the simplest ways to connect guests is as we mentioned, tastes of place and featuring local food. Telling the story of your destination and place is important. It is one thing to have local food present, but if you can share its presence and importance with event attendees, you can really differentiate yourself. This can be done through chef conversations and a welcome or closing address, or as Zoe mentioned earlier, be really active through our programming. It is also important to ensure that your offerings reflect of diversity of food and cultures in your event destination. Example, at the Heart of Ontario event that we are doing for Feast on the Farm, we are making sure that we are focusing on tastes of Hamilton, Halton, and Brant as represented, as opposed to one specific location. Connecting guests to Taste of Place does not have to end at the event. You can create ways to extend your experience by offering meaningful takeaways. Incorporate agritourism experiences into your event and be mindful of this during your venue selection. As Zoe mentioned, they can become an active and very important part of your programming and event as a whole, and not to singularly thinking about them as where you're hosting your event, but how they actually contribute to your entire event. When we look at what we've done, all of the chefs and producers at Feast on the Farm are committed to sourcing or producing local food. Not only do we have these chefs and producers present at our events, but we also give them a platform to share their story and importance of Taste of Place with all attendees. We also highlight local ingredients at our event menus and our marketing, and we make local ingredients available for participating chefs to use. Example, the New Farm event that we used, we had Good Leaf microgreens there that were part of a sponsorship agreement that chefs were able to use. We have offered Taste of Place takeaways as part of our Feast on the Farm programming. Last year, these giveaways came in the form of swag bags that were filled with products from local producers. As part of our efforts to connect guests with Taste of Place, we've also developed a stay and play model in collaboration with our destination partners to create opportunities for guests to return to event destinations and experience the taste of these destinations through our stay and play model. We have incorporated partnerships with organizations to run programming that connect with Taste of Place. The Wine Marketing Association of Ontario is a fantastic partner of our program and a great example of this. When we are talking about local, and we hear these words used a lot, unfortunately, there's a lot of greenwashing that goes on in our industry with it. So it's important to define local. When we're talking about in our home province, it means from Ontario. This is consistent with the OMAFRA definition of local. To be considered local, artisanal production must be done within the province, state, or region and incorporate in some local ingredients. Example, craft beer, breads, chocolate. From the Feast On perspective of it, we were really looking at the local sense of what is grown, produced, sold, all in Ontario. And it's not to discredit anything in terms of kilometer-based, as a great example that say may come from Quebec. It's actually to duplicate and create a framework for a model that could be created and duplicated in any province to be able to measure statistics and the local, how the local economy is benefiting from these aspects. So I think that's important to clarify. However, when developing culinary and agritourism with smaller geographic areas, it's important to reflect on regionally specific Taste of Place and source from growers and producers that reside in that area. How can your festival become a local food and beverage champion leader? If you're wondering what your next steps are, this is a checklist that can help guide you towards your answers. Does your festival event have an agricultural, local food, or viticultural focus? If your food and beverage is offered at festival events, where are the ingredients sourced from? To become a leader, you could choose to source more from locally and beverages locally, and as a result, incorporate far more stories into your programming. Does your festival event have strong ties to local growers and producers? Does it clearly establish and communicate relationships or partnerships with local farming communities? Example, call out producers on signage and help promote. Do you promote these partnerships? You may be tied strongly with local producers, but if these producers aren't promoted, a food tourist will not know about them, and more importantly, will not know how to seek them out. Does your festival event offer food tourism programming? You should provide tourism programming with educational and entertainment components so you can reach every aspect of your attendee. When we look at best practices, one of our main pillars that we talk about with it from both an economy standpoint, an event standpoint, and also an ecological standpoint is waste reduction. It's another best practice that we pride ourselves on. When we're looking at reducing waste, we consider our events and the environmental impact is something that we must think more about. Yeah, event production has historically been very wasteful, and to be honest, it's super promising to see more and more producers taking strides to reduce their event and environmental impact as an overall whole. I spent a lot of time I spent over 2 decades as a professional executive chef, and buffets were always, there was a fine art to doing food in itself that had you feeding everybody but not wasting food afterwards. And so this establishment for me is incredibly important. As part of your planning, we urge you to set waste related goals, establish in writing what measures you want to take to make your event even more eventually environmentally sound. Once you do this, communicate these goals with your partners so that you're all on the same page, and then take appropriate measures to achieve these goals together. When I look at this, I always say we actually, as we hold our events without garbages. So when we look at this aspect with it, you'll often see the confusion on when attendees attend your event and can't find a garbage, but there's something incredible that happens whenever you realize that you don't need one. And that's something we pride ourselves on. So reducing waste, the CTA has made a decision to make all Feast on the Farm zero waste events. When we're looking at this as an organization, we have made a commitment to actively work towards our 4 UN sustainable goals. And a goal that we are committed to is responsible consumption and production, which is why we are a zero waste event. Through our communications, both on-site and pre-event, we tell our guests that we are zero waste and explain what zero waste is important to us. Very important conversations to have at the beginning of planning, and they're conversations that you want to have with your venue partners to ensure they have the appropriate infrastructure to support your zero waste efforts. We've been able to share the story of our zero waste through our event programming by bringing speakers out to speak on their own personal zero waste journey, and by exposing consumers to on-site events that promote reduced waste efforts by leading by example. The CTA is also committed to carbon offsetting. We are buying back carbon used for all guest mileage as well as staff mileage spent traveling to and from events. And this is a regular best practice that we do actually for our entire calendar year regarding all travel used by CTA staff members. And now I'll turn it over to Zoe to talk about an incredibly important part of and another best practice.
Yeah, the final best practice that we're going to share today is around targeted engagement. So engagement practices should be done through the entire event cycle, before, during, and after the event, as we all know. And the event doesn't end when doors close. Having follow-up and engagement through the post-event dates is really important. And so storytelling is the prime way that we drive guest engagement. We use our partnerships to share about the goals and impact of our event to drive attendee interest as well as engagement. Guests want to understand the value of our events beyond price, beyond monetary value. They also want authentic narratives. And we've found that providing this has boosted our engagement. So utilizing social media has been a key tool in our driving guest engagement. Ease of access to event information is essential, and our social channels allow for this ease, as does having really easy to use booking platforms, which are 2 practices that we've had for our Feast on the Farm events. For Feast on the Farm, we engaged with prospective attendees before the event through our website, which served as our information hub, and through social media and newsletters, our newsletters, but also our partners' newsletters. And that has been really key in our success through collaboration. We've also run contesting, and after the event, we've published surveys and have had extensive debriefs with participants. So we've told our stories on social platforms before, during, and after the event to extend the event shelf life. And this has been key in the success of future events and future event planning. The culinary tourists look for ease, and we've ensured that we have a ticketing platform that has been easy for consumers to use, but also through social, making sure that any updates and event information has been also very easy to access. So Feast on the Farm ultimately gives Feast on businesses a platform to share their food stories, which is extraordinarily important to us. And a rundown for our 2022 events can be seen here. So as I mentioned, there are 5 of them this year, which we are so excited about. You can keep up to date by visiting ontarioculinary.com/fawn farm, and our event season kicks off in June with our first Feast on the Farm event at Simcoe County. Thank you all so much for your time. It's been a pleasure to chat with you. We open up the floor to any questions you have, and it's been a pleasure. Thanks.
Well, as we're waiting for questions to jump in the queue, I'm going to jump in and just relate a few Oktoberfest examples of how we really increased our culinary offerings. And it really worked for our event and for the community as well. I'm going to talk about 3 initiatives we did that really brought in some more audience. And one of them was, it's called the Stein and Dine. And we had a cicerone from a beer company in. We had celebrity chefs that would cook 4-course meal in front of the audience. And as the meal wrapped up, the banquet doors would open up and the back kitchen would have everybody's thing coming out. The cicerone would talk about the beer pairing, and the chef would incorporate that beer into their element. And, the table was set with 4 different glasses because beer, much like wine, there's different glasses for different brands. And, the cicerone would go into why the pairing was essential and talking about the glassware. As you're going down and you're creating these events, you wonder, is this going to work? And at the end of it, we were very surprised because we had a full banquet hall, and nobody was leaving at the end of the night, which is totally unusual for a banquet style setting. Normally, the MC says goodnight and the room evacuates, but everybody stayed at their table. We had to go around and ask people to leave, so we knew we were on to something successful there. And we just didn't sit back on our laurels and think, okay, now we've got culinary. The Bavarian food is a big element of the festival, and all the local fest halls had their specialties. But, now we were introducing some new ideas even to those fest halls. And so then we went, and one of the problems we had with the festival at the time was, 9 or 10 day festivals takes everybody out of restaurants and bars and everything for that period. So, the local restaurants and bars weren't always our biggest fans. So we created a October feast where we had programming in local restaurants for the month prior to the festival. And our only commitment to them was that, create a dish of your own that has a Bavarian flair and pair it with a beer. And we'll help you promote that through your community. And, we're going to bring in some audience at an off time. At the same time, we're promoting that the festival's coming up. And we saw that program grow and grow. So we thought, well, what else could we do? And off of that, we sprung up with the idea of a food truck fair. So we brought in 20 food trucks to one of our venues and, for a weekend. And again, our challenge to them was run your full menu, no problem. Obviously, you couldn't sell beer out of a food truck at the time. But, and then that really took off and it became very popular in the community. But what it also did is for some of our Fest Hall and Venue Partners is it looked at, hey, here's some great ideas for finger foods and different styles on that Bavarian flair that they can now incorporate into their offerings. So, everybody loves to eat, and it really is a great way to expand your offerings.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%, Dave. When you look at, we're all looking for ways, especially now in today's, to like build back and recover and what it is like, we take a really simplistic form to it, and you look at the thing that almost everybody does multiple times a day, and there's very few things that would outpace food. There's very few things that the average person does more times a day than eat or drink. And you're right, the unique experience in how to create, but there's another important thing that's in on that. We're very local focused on this, but it's actually about keeping the economy. When we look at recovery, it's actually about keeping that economy and that circular generation. Like, how do we get that money back in? How do we we know that when we import things, upwards of 50-60% of that money actually leaves our economy just to bring them to bring those products in. So when you look at, say, festival and events from a different perspective as well, and how much of it is coming from that proximity and is truly produced in the province with it, recovery actually happens way faster when 100% of that money stays in. And when we talk about, say, the food and beverage industries with it that have an increasingly like small margins, often restaurants and wineries and breweries are getting asked to donate their time. Well, just think about how much more of that time would be flexible with things if that money was actually staying within the economy. And I say this, Zoe knows this, I love this, but in terms of like impact with it, when we look at it, we have like studies that we've done through Culinary Tourism Alliance, and it's a bunch of data that's put in, but this is what it really comes down to. If every household in Ontario spent $10 a week in local food, on $10 a week in local food, it would equate to $2.4 billion in revenue and upwards of 10,000 new jobs. So when we look at how we're all impacted as an individual with it on the stuff that we can do, we can make those decisions for our own groceries. But when we look at that economic impact through festival and events and what support looks like, it's always great to bring in experts from across the world. But there's so many experts in Ontario as a way to do these local foods and local aspects with it, that where that direct benefit of showcasing that can actually make your events a success, make the economy a success, and streamline recovery. But I commend you guys on what you've done with it, because often it's looking at what you've done and going, where can we take it next? And I saw Wendy's question, and thank you, Debbie, for adding in the waste. When you look at zero waste events, the biggest thing to do is self-assess where your waste comes from, because that's where your brains start to work on, like, well, how can we make that better? And the carbon, in full transparency, the carbon offsetting came to us because we were like, we can't really call ourselves a zero waste event if we're actually negatively affecting the environment. And then we sat back and said, well, how do we get people to our events? And we realized carbon offsetting was actually what we should be doing. When we looked into it more, we were like, wait, this should actually be what we're doing all year round. And if we can justify in our head our travel, then we can justify that offset. And so be super vulnerable with yourselves in the sense of looking at your event when you want to go. It is a progress, and it is like, you're never going to achieve it in one day, but it's kind of fun to look at it and go, how can we improve, much like you guys did with your events.
Yeah, and some great points. You don't start off out of the gate doing everything right away, right? I mean, we brought in Chef D, and a lot of people here are involved or see him on TV in, Southwestern Ontario anyway. And the one element Chef D brought in was exactly what you talked about. He narrowed it down as to, okay, now we're going to do this dinner, and we're going to do this beer, and we're going to go into a 40-kilometer radius where all of our ingredients are going to come from within 40 kilometers from locally sourced products and produce and everything else. So again, that brings you right back and to what you were talking about.
Yeah, and what you realize too, like I was seeing Darren's question, FEO supplier that offers all recycled products. It's interesting. I actually don't have that answer, but I'll tell you, a lot of the suppliers that are producing us are actually making the same changes we're making. like all of us are like going through this, and we actually dictate a lot of what suppliers are carrying, not CTA, but I mean our industry dictates a lot of what CTAs are carrying, because as we start to ask for these things being important, suddenly they become really important to all the suppliers as well. There's some great organizations that are obviously further ahead than others with it, but just rebringing that home is like the important thing is to like just start somewhere. Feast on Zoe talked about it, but with it, but it's our program that unites all of these, like farmers, producers, suppliers, as well as our restaurants and wineries and just and viticulture and distilleries and spirits. It's all actually this great big program that works. So we actually find we're just better together because we're actually able to draw off each other's experience.
And further to Darren's question, I can't think off the top of my head of any single supplier, but I can think of one festival that does zero waste really well, with food and beverage and everything, and that's Hillside. And they've in Guelph, and they've prided themselves on having a zero footprint. And that includes bringing artists in from around the world and how they did that. And so for anybody that wants more information, I think that would be a good connecting ground. Is Marie Zimmerman and the team over at Hillside. Their food has been a zero waste component of their festival for a number of years, and they'll be able to share some good ideas on that as well.
Amazing.
I know one of the things, and my wife's a marathon runner, and you go to these events and you get little things in your run kits, and I'm certainly not a runner, I'm just a supporter, but she did one of them, and she got in her run kit was a leather cased with a wooden spoon and a wooden fork that she keeps on her mirror and stuff like that. So I mean, it's things like that, or water stations where you have a water truck and everybody brings their own water bottle to fill it up. And at Hillside, you bring your own eating element. You bring your own bowls and your own plates and stuff like that. You bring them in, you bring them out. So yeah, a lot of things to think about.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Kyle, I see Kyle has a question there. What are some of your successful strategies you've seen for storytelling around food and local supply in a particular region? There's great examples of this. Storytelling to me is the most, this is the most unique experience that can identify any experience that you have. And why is because people can copy what you do, but they often can't copy your stories. And so bringing in those attributes with it, there's a lot. So we mentioned earlier, the New Farm. Well, the New Farm has done some amazing local storytelling into not just being regenerative, but actually creating the criteria for what regenerative farming looks like with it. So that was a great example of how they weren't grouped into just like being farming. They were grouping into like what they were doing to differentiate themselves. But that could go through any production, any business that's going through. What I always say is think about the reasons why you got in or why you chose a partner in this business. Why were you inspired by them? Why did they get into it? What are the differences that make them special? I made a career myself as an Indigenous chef by telling the stories behind food, telling the generations of it with it. And one other really great example was Nick Benninger of Taco Farm, was a Caucasian gentleman who owns a taco farm, who owns a restaurant called Taco Farm, who has a head chef that is Indigenous and a head sous chef that is Mexican. And it's this cultural that has come together to make the world's best tacos, but share that story about how all those cultures played their part to come in. And that has helped further the storytelling behind what we would all just say is a taco. So it's a great way of explaining your differentiated, but truthfully, the easy way to do it is what makes you special? What are you passionate about? And how can we incorporate that in? Last but not least, in your event, make time for programming that as part of your programming so other people can tell your stories. The best marketing is marketing others so they can market you, and building that into your program is a really great way.
I was just going to roll off the back of that. It's so funny you brought that up, because earlier in the month, we had somebody on from sponsorship group, and he was talking about analyzing the drive-by path to and from your festivals and partner with those, whether it's a roadside vegetable stand or whatever, is look at all of those elements coming in and going out of your festival and the routes that they pass and partner with those stands. And when you sit down and think about it, it becomes easy to do. and you can almost overwhelm yourself by the ease of it. But you know, it's making that first step and getting into it and seeing the fruits of your labors.
Yeah, and we're better together than separate, right? Like when we look at these like smaller margins, we look at it, you know, we much like what your conference is doing, like exactly it. It's bringing people together with it to learn from each other, but also to help. And I agree. I couldn't have said it better, Dave. Like anybody that is on your path to do it, if they have to drive by somebody to get to you, any way you can incorporate them in to try to help you just builds that community that we're all trying to build.
Yeah, so I mean, if you're not sure where to start, just have a look around. Do that local drive. And I mean, if you're an organizer in your community, you know your local hotspots. You know your sourced food, and reach out to them. I mean, you know, I think you'll find that farmers are happy to be a part of your programming and to be a part of your program. It's just a matter of thinking of them as another opportunity, you know, to grow your festival and to grow their support.
Yeah, absolutely. So much of what we've learned has come through organic conversation, and that's helped us a lot in growing kind of initial efforts that we've thought about to making them tangible in practice. And so we're all learning, and I think once we admit that we're vulnerable enough to do that, then I think that's why we've experienced great success. For example, we through organic conversation, learned of the Guelph's initiative of their circular food hub, which is a huge zero waste effort. And that has come through organic conversation. So little things like that, just kind of be vulnerable and chat with those around you.
And then the other thing is, if you have a culinary element of that, you know, whether it's a fair with a lot of carnival food stations, challenge them to make it more local. Challenge them to come up with a recipe or a single server that ties in the root of your festival or the culture of your community or the multicultural of your community, and bring that to the table.
That's great advice.
Well, Zoe and Billy, a lot of great information. Just before we head out, if anybody wants to get in touch with the Culinary Tourism Alliance, what's their best bet? I know Jay's had it up in our chat. And how is it best to get a hold of you guys for some information or advice as people move along their planning process?
Yeah, so I think so. We can add in the chat there again one more time. Our emails is direct best way to get like in touch with us. But the truth is, if you're at all connected with CTA or want to be connected with CTA, we have an incredibly like small but mighty team that all works together with it. So the truth is, if you go on any of our websites, look at our front facing consumer website, ontarioculinary.com, any of these things, it'll tell you how to get in touch with us as well if you don't want to do the emails. And yeah, we're super accessible, and we are here to help all of these best practice organizations that are doing it. We are a partner with and are looking to just help in any way. As Zoe said earlier, we're collaborative, not in competition with. We're collaborative with everybody, seeing what we can do to leverage our network to help.
Billy, and so thank you very much for your presentation today. A lot of great points there, and starting to get hungry as we move towards the lunch hour. So thanks very much for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.